Good day, everyone. All right, you know my name, obviously. I'm Mr. Tung, and I'm here to read you a Christmas story. So today, I've chosen Shooting at the Stars by John Hendrix. Peace on earth, goodwill to men. I heard the bells on Christmas Day, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. 100 years ago, a horrible war began. It was the biggest conflict the world had ever seen. Journalists would call it the Great War, but it wasn't great at all. It was dreadful. Today, we call it the First World War. An entire European generation was destroyed fighting a war that ultimately produced very little. Even a century later, the causes of this terrible war are identifiable, but they are dramatically insufficient considering the ghastly price of over 37 million civilian and military lives. The war was built on national pride and political glory, and even more tragically, it was completely avoidable. The war involved two opposing forces or armies. These armies were not just a single country, but a collection of nations called an alliance. Conflict arose from the Central Powers, an alliance between Austria-Hungary, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire, now known as Turkey. The Central Powers were opposed by the Triple Entente, an alliance between France, the British Empire, and Russia. The Triple Entente eventually called for help, becoming the Allied Powers. By the end of the war, the Allied and associated powers comprised many colonies and allies, including the United States. The opposing forces in this massive conflict were the victims of their own alliances. Alliances were designed to prevent war by strengthening the response to an attack. But in the case of the First World War, these complex alliances actually made war more likely. They were precariously designed like upright dominoes, and the smallest push on one country sent all the countries tumbling into war. As the dominoes began to fall, millions of young men signed up to join the war in the late summer of 1914. Many assumed the war would be a short adventure that would certainly end by Christmas. By fall, the fighting turned nasty. As the advances of each army stagnated, stymied by mud and new weapons like the machine gun, soldiers dug trenches in the ground to strengthen their positions. The close quarters of these battles meant that often less than 100 feet separated opposing armies. When a bitter winter arrived on the front line in northern France, the reality of a prolonged war finally set in. Every man on the front, no matter his uniform, was cold, fearful, and without hope of returning home anytime soon. Although these soldiers were at war and spoke different languages, the English, French, and Germans shared much: songs, faith, and a deep love of Christmas. This is the true story of what happened one cold winter evening. France, 1914. Dearest Mother, thank you so much for your last letter. Your words are a rare comfort to me in my cold trench. I so wish to make you proud and to serve my beloved England with honor. But life in this foul pit is very trying. Was I really finishing school only a few months ago? We've been stuck in the same spot since October. They say it may start raining again later tomorrow. Rain means more mud. The mud here is like none I've ever experienced. When it rains, a thick, loamy foam churns up from the ground and fouls everything we own. The mud I remember from our garden is beautiful in comparison to this wretched stuff. It is sticky and heavy. In some places, it is 3 feet deep. I'm not sure how anyone could fight a war in these conditions. We spend most of our time and energy trying to stay dry and warm. When the artillery fight finally stops for the evening, it is time to fight the rats for dinner, which is usually cold beans. The only place to eat and sleep is in the bunkers, but when it rains, being inside is miserable. It is very cold today, and clearly our hopes of the war ending by Christmas have faded. But, Mother, I must tell you about something that happened today. A tale so wonderful that you will hardly believe my account. Christmas Eve was quieter on the line than usual, and we all hoped for a day without shelling. The drastic cold that rolled in 2 days ago became an unexpected blessing. The hard frost turned our mucky trench back into solid ground. We had a few hours of sure-footed steps around our meager home. After the sun went down, we decided to chance a fire outside the bunker. But when we stepped outdoors, we heard the sounds of singing. I looked down the line to find out who was foolish enough to give away his position to the enemy. But the noise wasn't coming from our trench at all. As I cautiously stuck my head over the edge of the trench, I couldn't believe what I saw. The Germans! Our enemy was singing? Not only were they singing as loud as they could, it sounded like Silent Night, but all along their line, tiny Christmas trees lit with candles and lanterns had appeared. Several of our boys suggested taking shots at the trees, but most of us were just glad the Germans weren't trying to shoot us. We wondered where they got all those little trees. We went to sleep astonished. Fritz, that's what we always called the Germans, sang all night, it seemed. But this was nothing compared to what today would hold. Once the sun got over the horizon, we saw the Germans hoist up a banner, on the back of an ammunition crate, I think, that said, "Merry Christmas." Then came a voice. "Hello! English soldiers! Where are your Christmas trees?" Followed by great laughter from their trench. We could hear everything, for they are only 30 steps to the east. Rifleman Tapp, who has a great arm, took several cans of pear jam and heaved them into no man's land, the open ground between the trenches, very near the German line. One of their officers poked his head up, saw the jam, and then stood right up, waving at us. He wanted us to come up as well. Most of us thought it was surely a trap. But before we could do a thing, our Lieutenant Lovell had made his way through the barbed wire and was walking right out to meet the German officer. They met and shook hands. Perhaps an angel of the Lord was among us today. What else could create such spontaneous peace but the hand of God himself? The lieutenant signaled for us to come out. I didn't know what was happening, but it wasn't war. For one glorious Christmas morning, war had taken a holiday. We all met along a small ditch in the center of no man's land. The first thing we did was bury our fellow soldiers who had been killed. They were everywhere at our feet. It took some time to finish the grim task. I helped a German officer bury a very young soldier. He was about my age. We lashed together some crosses, and our second lieutenant, Graham Collins, said a short prayer. Then we all shook hands and wished one another a Merry Christmas. I can hardly describe to you what it was like here. We were talking with men we were trying to kill just the day before. A few of the lads had bought pocket cameras from home, so they took pictures together. I traded buttons from my field coat for a belt buckle with a German soldier named Karl. There was also much trading of biscuits and puddings. We had our fill. There were two soldiers in such a good mood, they started kicking around an old biscuit tin like a football, using two battered tree stumps as a goal. Carl said to me, "Why can't we just go home and have peace?" We spent most of the afternoon out there. Mother, it was such a beautiful day. As the evening came, we made our way back to the trenches. Many returned with souvenirs like I did. Everyone was jealous of Bruce Coy, who traded his hat for a German helmet with a pointy top. They called them pickle hubs. We sat upon the edge of our trench and laughed together. It felt like I was back in school. No sooner had we got back than Major Walter Watts came bounding in from the rear trench headquarters. He was furious and ordered us to load our weapons and be ready to fire on the German trench when he returned. He said we had acted like traitors to Britain, but how could a day of peace be treason? The Major was angry that we had befriended the enemy. They didn't seem like the enemy today. Altogether, it was a splendid day with our foes. Tomorrow, I suppose we will all fight for our countries, and when the Major returns, we will have to follow his orders. But I suspect our side will spend the rest of the night aiming high above their trench, shooting at the stars. Merry Christmas, Mum. With love, Charlie. December 25th, 1914. Good night, English soldiers. The end. Thank you for allowing me to read to you guys for this Christmas holiday. I wish all of you a safe, peaceful, happy, and very enjoyable Christmas. And I can't wait to see you guys in 2022. Best of wishes to all of you.